Some early overachievers are starting to level out, and some with high expectations are spinning their wheels. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shifts for Friday, December 19th, 2025. Vic and Neil with you, heading into the weekend before Christmas. And just want to remind folks that are listening to us on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Overcast, or really any platform you listen on, if you have the ability to write a review on our show, please do. We'd much appreciate that. And if you are tuning into us on YouTube, please subscribe. Our latest subscribers, Aiden Weiss, Michael Lloyd, Joe McCloskey, Mr. Impulse 101, El Zorro 098, and Don Solomon. Welcome aboard.
And I think Don Solomon might be the New York Rangers team dentist and was a dentist while I was there. And Don, if that is you, let me know. And Don, if it's not you, Don, that I don't know, thank you for subscribing.
If he is the team dentist, are you going to drop that awful joke?
No, because the only time I would make an appointment to go see him would be at Tooth Hurty.
All right. Good time to get into the show here, because I believe over the last couple of nights, I want to see if you agree with me, we're probably two of the least eventful nights of the season in a 25-26 that has been full of excitement thus far. I thought that the last two evenings were okay. We had only 5 one-goal games out of the 15 that were played. Only 2 of them going beyond 60 minutes. The Devils winning in Vegas in a shootout on Wednesday, and the Rangers in St. Louis going to overtime on Thursday in a game which, by the way, anybody that saw the last 5 minutes of that, have you ever seen two teams more eager to get those 5 minutes out of the way just to get to overtime to get their point?
Well, and that's what teams are like that are struggling. And for the Rangers, of course, they're underachieving as much as anybody in the league. And for the banged up St. Louis Blues, they're trying to scrape and claw to get every point they can just to stay in some kind of race for a wild card spot. So it didn't surprise me. And this is what's happening all over the league. Teams are trying to get to overtime to guarantee a point. If you get within 2 or 3 minutes of having a point and you're nervous that the team could take both points off the board, of course you're going to do whatever you can to ensure the point. Do you get my point?
Yes, I get
so
your
you
point.
Get the point about the point.
I do, but there are a few clubs that are really struggling to get points, and teams that perhaps are now starting to really seek their level after some surprising beginnings. First off, the Chicago Blackhawks, who lost their 6th of 7, 4-1 in Montreal on Thursday. Certainly they're hurt, Neil, by the loss of Connor Bedard. But also, the only goal the Hawks scored last night was by Frank Nazar. That is his first goal since October the 28th, and the Blackhawks have now dropped into the 6th wildcard position in the West.
And Frank Nazar, of course, carries with him that heavy contract that he got this summer. And Connor Bedard, when he's out of the lineup, it is a different team. But the Blackhawks aren't flying the way they certainly were earlier, and they've come down to earth a little bit. And I think they're not catching anybody by surprise now. That's the other thing. I think early in the season, people thought of the Blackhawks, and for that matter, the Sharks, as, oh, well, it's the Blackhawks or those Sharkies, and they didn't play as hard. Now you know both those teams, especially with Bedard in the lineup, especially when Celebrini is playing, you gotta be careful, because that's not an easy 2 points anymore.
If you're Jeff Blashill now, probably the time to go right back to basics, playing more defense-first hockey, which we saw a lot of with Chicago when they were having success early on.
Yeah, and the other thing about Jeff Blashill is he's faced this kind of ups and downs with a developing team in Detroit, and I'm sure he's got some tricks up his sleeve. In other words, he knows he's handled this before, getting into a losing streak and then a winning streak, and then this is part of the development of a young team. He's handled that before, and I'm sure he'll handle it again.
Seattle Kraken are 1-9-1 in their last 11, giving up 3 goals in the third period and a 4-2 loss in Calgary on Thursday. They were outshot 46-23 and out-attempted 76-42 by a Flames team that is not exactly known for their offensive prowess. The Kraken have now dropped to wild card 8, and you remember when we were praising the defense, we were praising the goaltending, which I think went up to as high as number 2 in the league in goals against average, and they are now sitting at 18th.
Lane Lambert is in his first year with the Kraken. The Kraken have had how many coaches now? I mean, they've only been in the league a short period of time.
Dave Haxtell, Dan Bilesma, and now Lambert.
Lane Lambert. I mean, but 3 is a lot in, 5 years?
Yeah.
They've been in the leagues. The Kraken is a tough nut to cracken, I guess.
That's right up there with your dentist joke. The Pittsburgh Penguins now winless in 7. So what sounds worse, winless in 7 or 0-3-4 in their last 7? After being shut out 4-0 in Ottawa on Thursday, this coincides with Evgeny Malkin going out with an injury. Reportedly, he is now starting to skate again. But the Penguins have dropped to 7th in the Metro and 6th in the wild card in the East. And I think almost like with Chicago, where the expectations were not very high, they weren't high in Pittsburgh. Dan Muse got the club off to a great start, but now things appear to be seeking their level.
Yeah, and, they did have a great start, and they're still playing .561 winning percentage hockey. A Penguins fan would point out that they're only 2 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning for the wild card spot. But I would point out that they're a -3 in goal differential, and that they're playing .500 at home. They're good on the road, 8-4-4, but their shootouts have hurt them. 0-5 in shootouts. So the Penguins might be coming back to their level that we expected when we did our preseason shows, but, they're still in the hunt.
Remember also that every team in the Eastern Conference is at NHL 500 or better, while 6 clubs in the West are below 500. So we can certainly see where what we called last year that mosh pit of mediocrity is certainly showing its face in the Eastern Conference.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, NHL 500, because it's not really 500. I mean, you take the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are last in the Eastern Conference. Their NHL record is 14-14-6. Well, that's 14-20 in my book, because you skated off the ice having lost 20 times. Even though 6 of them you got a point. So you can say they're 500 points wise, but they're not 500 wins and losses wise.
And I just want to correct myself. There are actually 7 teams in the West that are below 500 as opposed to 6. So even more to the point. Hey, what about the urgency level for 2 high-profile teams in Canada? We're going to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, who really sleptwalked through the first 2 periods against Chicago on Tuesday. They got 3 goals in the third period to salvage that game. They go into Washington, get shut out 4-0. They're wild card 8. Their power play is 31st at 14.1%, only above Calgary. They've scored power play goals in only 11 of their 33 games, and only 2 power play goals in a game one time this season. And Craig Berube, once again, when he was asked after this game, where was the compete level with your team? And he just deferred to the players, said, you got to ask them. And this is just the same malaise that we continue to see with the Buds.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand. It really is. I mean, the only difference in the team is Marner, but is that enough to cause this? The goaltending hasn't been bad. Stolarz has been hurt all this time, but Hildeby has come in and saved them in that area. You're right, Vic. Everybody's right. They don't have the compete level, and you wonder why. I mean, what is going on that they don't? The only thing I can say from my experience is that when you see something like this going on, it usually calls for a change of the voice. And I'm not saying anything negative about Craig Berube. I think he's done a good job in Toronto. But when you see this from the outside, you see a team sleepwalking around and not playing hard, and the message is obviously not getting through. And you saw him on the bench the other night when they had only one shot at home in the first period. One shot. I think they ended up with two. And it looked like Berube was going to throw the bench on the ice. But he's not getting through to these guys for whatever reason.
But he's only in his second year there. And people had said after they moved Sheldon Keefe, who's now, of course, the head coach in New Jersey, that Berube style, the way he approached the game, the fact that he led the Blues to the Stanley Cup in 2019, all of that stuff, that was the right kind of coach to get this team over the hump. And it seems like we are back to the starting blocks once again with this franchise.
Absolutely. And, we had Doug Armstrong on our show, as you'll remember, right after that hire was made. And I said to him, you have a totally different type of team in St. Louis. When Craig was there, you've got a lunch pail gang in St. Louis that just put their nose down and went hard. You don't have that in Toronto. How will Craig adjust to that? And he said, it's not that Craig will adjust. The players will have to adjust to Craig. Well, they did last year and got over 100 points and ended in first place. But for whatever reason, they're certainly not doing it this year.
Another club that's struggling, although I believe they continue to work hard and just aren't getting the results, the Winnipeg Jets. They were shut out 1-0 in St. Louis on Wednesday. They are 3-9-2 in their last 14 games. Fifth in the wild card in the West, and they're at Colorado on Friday, so good luck with that. We had Kevin Cheveldayoff on only a few weeks ago when the team started to slide, and at that time we titled the show Still Flying High, coming off their President's Trophy winning season a year ago. But this is starting to feel like a crash landing here. And I think it is very possible we could see consecutive President's Trophy winners miss the playoffs the next season because the Rangers won the President's Trophy in 24, missed last year. The Jets won the President's Trophy a year ago. And right now, they're in trouble.
Yeah, and they're not just out of the playoffs right now. We talked about NHL 500. They're not NHL 500, which is sort of a given, wouldn't you think? I mean, their record is really 33 games played, 15 wins, 18 losses, -2 on goal differential. They're 2 games under 500 on the road. They're 3-5-2 in their last 10. They're going to have to put it into high gear and get going here. I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs by any stretch, but they might end up being just a wild card.
There's enough weakness in the Western Conference that they should be able to get their points. But also remember that in their own division, there is Colorado and Dallas and Minnesota. You got Vegas in the Pacific, along with Edmonton, who is starting to play very well. So this is a club that's going to have to do some bottom feeding in order to start supplementing that point total.
Scott Arniel has a big task ahead of him. Everything went right for him last year, and things aren't going right for him this year, but that's the NHL. There are ups and downs. He's got a very supportive general manager in Kevin Cheveldayoff. They seem to be very good partners in Winnipeg. So we'll see if Connor Hellebuck, the reigning MVP, and Mark Scheifele and Lowry and on, can get this team turned around.
You had noted when we talked about Toronto, the loss of Mitch Marner, and we could certainly look at Winnipeg and the loss of Nikolai Ehlers. But should losing one player make that much difference? You addressed the Maple Leafs. Talk to me about what you see in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I think that losing Ehlers might have brought their speed down way more than you could possibly imagine. They're not nearly as quick as they were last year. I don't know how you lose one player. Again, you lose Marner in Toronto, lose Ehlers in Winnipeg, and that changes your whole dynamic of your team. You might think that if you lost Scheifele or you lost Kyle Connor or Morrissey or Hellebuck, but you wouldn't think it would be that way with Ehlers. But I don't know what else to point to. They're not as quick as they were, and I don't know how they're going to get that quickness back.
Well, they didn't exactly light it up with Hellebuck out of the lineup either. So,
absolutely,
they were 3-8-1 or something like that. So stay tuned. Let's move this to something a little bit more positive, at least for the time being. There is a pulse in Buffalo again. Their fourth straight win, a 5-3 win over Philadelphia on Thursday. Tage Thompson scores in his fifth straight game. In this one, Lindy Ruff passes Barry Trotz for fourth all-time with his 915th win as a head coach. So let's hold the phone on the firing and all the other stuff that is starting to get rumored now that Jarmo Kekalainen is the general manager. And Emily Kaplan reported that some changes are still coming in Buffalo. One at some point could be behind the bench. Peter DeBoer's name came up. John Tortorella's name came up. And, of course, Steve Levy baited Torts in the intermission last night as to whether or not he had talked to the Sabres. And, look, both of us know John. And he knows Ruff. And there's absolutely no way that even if he has talked to Buffalo that he's going to say anything.
You got to understand one thing, too. They've won 4 in a row. The owner is still the owner there. Pegula still owns the team. Pegula still anointed himself as president of the team. Jarmo Kekalainen isn't going to be able to come in and make whatever moves he wants. They're going to have to all be cleared by Pegula. And Pegula's not going to let him do anything that makes sense. He's not going to let him do things that he thinks would make the team better. He's not going to let him fire Lindy Ruff. He's going to let him do what he thinks he should do, meaning what Pegula thinks he should do. That's the way it's been there since they've owned the team. And they've been out of the playoffs for 14 straight seasons. So I don't see a lot of things changing. I don't see all of a sudden brilliance coming out of the general manager's chair. I don't think that Kevin Adams was to blame for everything going on in Buffalo. I think Pegula is.
They're still ninth in the Eastern wild card. So before we start to get all excited about this 4-game winning streak, it's the same thing that we see with them over and over again, that they're going to show a little bit of a pulse, and then they'll lose 5 out of 6 and drop out, and then they'll win a few games, and they'll make maybe a little bit of a push at the end for a wild card berth and fall short, and then we're going to be right back to where we started from when we do our summer coolers again in August.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. Just like the Toronto Maple Leafs, they win their home games and they lose their road games. So that's not a formula to make the playoffs. You know, you better win all your home games if you're going to lose your road games. So I won't buy it until I see it. 4 in a row is fine, but they're still only playing .515, which is second worst in the conference. They're still a -9 in goal differential. I'm not buying this until I see it happen a lot more. And I'm not buying all these brilliant changes that are coming in Buffalo just because Jarmo Kekalainen has brought his brilliance from his job in Columbus now to Buffalo.
You're not going to anoint yourself president of this podcast, are you? Maybe make a change.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to say that. Why would I need Walter Cronkite? I'm president. I can do it.
Let's talk some backline studs. And we've given a lot of attention this year to Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, and Matthew Schaefer. But a couple of guys from last year who we were talking about in terms of potential Norris Trophy, doing it again in 25-26. Jacob Chychrun, 2 goals in the win over Toronto on Thursday. He's got 14 goals in 34 games. He had 20 and 74 last season. And Zach Werenski scored both Blue Jackets goals in their 5-2 loss to the continuing to be hot Minnesota Wild. He's got 13 in 34 games. He had a career-high 23 a season ago. So even though the first three names we mentioned deserve all the accolades, certainly Chychrun and Werenski continue to be outstanding for the Caps and Blue Jackets, respectively.
And Jacob Chychrun is a big reason why the Caps are where they are. I mean, he really is. And he was tremendous for them last year, as you just mentioned. And he's just picked it right up where he left off last season. Zach Werenski is one of the most talented defensemen in the league, without a doubt. If you watch the Columbus Blue Jackets play, you'll see that he is the star for their team. And they continue on. And yes, they're going to get Norris Trophy mention for sure, if not be a finalist for the trophy.
And Werenski was nicked a couple of times last night and still managed to come back and played a really noble game, that aside from his 2 goals. Also want to make note of Lane Hudson, who had 3 assists in the Canadiens' win against Chicago, but now transitioning off of the defenseman, his brother Quinn, his first NHL goal, and it turned out to be the game winner in the Oilers' 3-1 win over the Bruins in Boston. The Oilers now 6-1-1 in their last 8, and it's almost like the world is starting to get on its proper axis again in Edmonton.
It is, and they're really dominant at home. That game that you just mentioned was in Boston, where they won 3-1, and Quinn Hudson got his first goal. But Edmonton, which Edmonton are we going to see next time they play? We don't know, right? We don't know, because you can't depend on them. And now they've decided, it's almost Christmas. It's time to start playing well. They've done that the last couple of years. Does this goaltending change with Tristan Jarry coming into the net as the number 1 guy for Edmonton? Does that make a big change? We'll see if he comes back from injury, first of all.
Jarry did have to leave the game in the second period with a lower body injury stretching across the crease. And on Friday afternoon, the Oilers put Jarry on injured reserve. Connor Ingram has been recalled from the Bakersfield Condors. Calvin Pickard will now move into the number 1 slot for the immediate future. But also, Ray Ferraro had said that he can't figure it out the last 3 seasons, that the Oilers, for whatever reason, can't break out of the starting blocks. But I think you're starting to see the consistency in their game that typically kicks in around this time over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, it does. And that's what I said, that they're maybe saying to each other, it's almost Christmas. We better start playing now, because they hadn't been doing that. And I don't know how many times you can pull that act on the NHL, and all of a sudden go from the funhouse mirrors to normal mirrors and say, okay, here we go. They've got the talent to do it. Definitely 2 of the best players in the league. Is that enough? We'll see.
But you've also got 7 teams below 500 in the West, so it almost affords itself for that margin of error.
True, it does. And again, there are teams that are achieving well this year that could slip because they haven't had this level of success on a consistent basis. Anaheim, we really like them. We liked what they did in the summer. They're good, but they're not consistent winners. They could have a skid here and there. The San Jose Sharks, who are currently in a playoff spot, could skid. The Utah Mammoth, the same thing. And so you've got some teams that could, take it on the chin here in the second half that aren't used to it. One of them isn't going to be Colorado, though, with their 13-0-2 home record.
Let's hit some other personnel notes. Tampa Bay Lightning. A lot going on there. Nikita Kucherov did not play in Thursday's loss against Los Angeles with an illness. Brandon Hagel was also out in that game with an upper body injury that he suffered Monday against Florida. Kucherov was supposed to play in that game, and after he was scratched, the Lightning wound up going with only 17 skaters in that game. They did get back Andrei Vasilevsky after missing 7 games with an undisclosed injury, and Ryan McDonough came back after missing 18 games with a lower body injury. But during that game, in the third period, Anthony Cirelli ran into Kevin Fiala. He got knocked down, got up slowly, went to the locker room, did not return, so we're going to await a report on him. And for Tampa Bay, it's almost like a revolving door of players coming in and out of that lineup, which is not terribly different from a lot of other clubs. But in Tampa in particular, so many high-end guys just coming in and out of that lineup.
That's true. Maybe this year Tampa is taking a page out of Florida's book and sort of going to stay banged up during the regular season, have a ho-hum regular season, then get everybody healthy for the playoffs. If they did that, they'd certainly be a formidable team because they are a very, very good team when everybody is healthy. And we'll just have to see how John Cooper keeps magically keeping this team going somehow through all of this.
Artemi Panarin for the Rangers missed their overtime win in St. Louis on Thursday. He was also ill. So Gabe Perreault and Brennan Othmann were called up. Perreault gets his first NHL goal. It was the only goal the Rangers scored in regulation. JT Miller with his third overtime winner of the year for New York in what otherwise was probably an uninspiring win for the Blue Shirts. And Jack Eichel, illness, and Shea Theodore with an upper body injury missed Wednesday's shootout loss against the Devils. Jake Bean for the Calgary Flames underwent surgery for an undisclosed injury. He is out indefinitely. And defenseman Connor Timmins for the Buffalo Sabres out 6 to 8 weeks after breaking his leg in a non-contact episode against the Flyers. Evidently, he caught his skate in a rut and now will be out for the better part of 2 months. Gustav Forsling of the Panthers played in Wednesday's win against Los Angeles. He left the game versus Tampa on Monday after blocking a shot. And finally, Matthew Tkachuk may not return for the Winter Classic on January 2nd against the Rangers. Initially, Christmas was the goal for Tkachuk, and it may be a little bit while longer. We know how much players want to be able to perform in these outdoor games, but I think the bottom line is get this guy back 100% so there are no setbacks as the Panthers continue to play well and start to get bodies back as we come into the second half of the season.
I want to go back to something you said about Panarin just for a second because I want to tell the audience this if they don't know. I'm sure you know because usually anything I come up with you already know, or at least that's what you tell me. Gabe Perreault is the son of Yannick Perreault, who played 850-odd games in the National Hockey League, most of them in Montreal and Toronto. That was something I wasn't aware of until just lately. So I just wanted to mention that because I don't hear it come up that often.
Glad you did. You have anything else personnel-wise before we move to our last item?
I do. I have something here about the New York Islanders, which is that their number 13, who would be one Matthew Barzal, was absent from the morning skate and is a game-time decision for tonight's game against the Vancouver Canucks at UBS Arena. Moritz Seider is not on the ice for practice for the Red Wings, and Patrick Kane left the ice when the rest of the contact players for Detroit went onto the ice, so he's not ready to play as well.
And he has missed the last 2 games for Detroit. So a couple of days ago, reached out to you about something that I observed, and then you went ahead and did a little bit of research on it about backup goaltenders coming to the rescue this year and playing better than their number ones. And we could look at Jersey and St. Louis and Columbus and Carolina. What did your research reveal about the understudies outdoing the star performers?
There's a lot more than we think that are playing better than their number ones. There's a lot more backups that actually have better numbers than the guy that is supposed to be the number one goaltender. And I'm going to write about this in Neil's Nuggets and let everybody know exactly what this is. It's very interesting, though. It's something that you wouldn't have thought was like this until you really studied it. There are 11 teams where the goaltender who is anointed number one actually has inferior numbers to the backup. And I'm going to talk about that on Neil's Nuggets on NHLWraparound.com.
Can you give us any big examples? And the names that I look at in Jersey, Jake Allen playing better than Jacob Markstrom. In St. Louis, Joe Hofer playing better than Jordan Binnington, although Binnington did play a strong game against the Rangers on Thursday. Jet Greaves, apparently now the new number one over Elvis Merzlikins in Columbus. And take your pick, either Brandon Bussey or Pyotr Pachekov in Carolina. Freddie Anderson nowhere to be found.
But there's also examples in Calgary where Cooley is out playing Dustin Wolf right now. In Florida, Tarasov has better numbers than Bobrovsky, although you have to remember that the starter usually gets the tough games, and the backup doesn't have as tough a game, although the backup a lot of times is thrown in on the second of back-to-back games. And also in Toronto, the rookie Hildeby has much better numbers than what Stolarz had when he left with injury earlier in the season. So there's a lot out there, including Lyon in Buffalo, who's out playing Luukkonen. So you got a lot of guys, a lot of teams with the backup goaltender actually having better numbers than the starter.
There should be some interesting info that Neil shares on Neil's Nuggets. For the weekend, some games that I'm looking at on Friday: Carolina at Florida. Hurricanes are rolling. Panthers are starting to flex their muscles a little bit. They're in the midst of a long stretch of home games. And Dallas at Anaheim. I want to see how the Ducks fare against one of the top teams in the league in the Dallas Stars. And on Saturday and Sunday, really good acid test for the Minnesota Wild, who have been playing exceptional. Now they have Quinn Hughes. They will welcome the Oilers on Saturday and the Colorado Avalanche on Sunday. And I think both of those games are must-see TV or streaming.
Yeah, must-see computer. You're right. Those will be real good games. And there's a plethora of games going on over the weekend that'll be fun. And there'll be start time to match whatever you'd like to use. Because on Sunday, the first one's at 1 o'clock. The last one's at 8 o'clock. We're talking Eastern time. On Saturday, we've got two games that start at 12:30, God forbid, and then go right up to a 10 o'clock Eastern time game. And tonight, 2 at 7, 2 at 9, and 1 at 10 Eastern time.
All busy leading up into Christmas week, where there will be a 3-day break. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. Check out our blog section where we have New York-centric Neil's Nuggets, as we just mentioned before, and Smith's Picks. So you go and pick 7 games on Thursday.
Yeah.
You go 6-1. For those of you that cannot see Neil on camera right now, because this is an audio show only, he is really pumping his chest here. The only game you lost was Tampa Bay against Los Angeles, and had Kucherov and Hagel played, you could have been looking at a 7-game sweep there, muchacho.
Yeah, and you know what? If there was a game where you thought for sure you could pick a winner, would you not pick Tampa Bay rested playing LA coming out of Florida? Of course you would. And yet, LA won.
Yeah, you won 6 other games, so stop with your stand-up philosophy here.
Well, it's not my philosophy. It's proven fact.
Here's a more proven fact. Short shifts on Monday, and we'll be back with NHL Wraparound next Wednesday with one of the great hockey photographers of all time, Bruce Bennett. Enjoy the hockey this weekend.